Welcome to Fast Track, brought to you by Aera, the podcast where we help you get into your first home faster. I'm Chereè and Derek, with me Aera founder Derek Handley, and today we're going to talk about strategy and how to know where you're at on your home buying journey and what to do when there are still some hurdles you may need to jump. Now, Derek, a lot of the time on the Aera socials, we do these situation type chats where people send in their situation, what their earnings are, their debt, what they, if there's anything else that might be stopping them, and they usually don't actually know where they're at. And more often than not, they're quite surprised to learn that they're not that far away from being able to own a home. So I guess to start off with, how important is it to establish that strategy?
I think it's like the most important thing to begin with, right? Because if you don't have an idea of how far you are or what you've got to do to achieve your first home goal, then you don't actually know what you can do to close the gap, right? So in those situations, a lot of people are closer. They have no idea they've got money, they've got income, and they figure out when we reply to them like, oh, actually you could buy in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. And that's pretty important, but those are more like people to the finish line. People who are starting also need to think about, okay, how far am I talking about here? Like 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? And then they can create a plan to make something happen.
When it comes to the psychology perspective of all of that, and we've talked about before goal setting and how important it is to kind of mentally get your head around that. Does that play into it at those early stages too?
Yeah, it's really, really powerful because if you know roughly how to go from A to B, it's about 2 to 3 times more likely that you're going to be able to achieve it. So if you're just kind of wondering and you're not sure and you're just working towards something that you think is going to happen in the future, it's 2 to 3 times less likely you're going to achieve it than someone who knows, like, I'm actually focusing on this target.
Just to break it down further, because I'm thinking we talk a lot about strategy, and for a lot of people that might just be a word that we throw around, and they might not really understand like the logistics of like, are we talking that you need to almost write it out or like use the tools on the Aera app to establish where you are, get that game plan, that map? Like, what would you tell people that you actually, what's the doing there? Like, what do you need to do to set that up for yourself?
That's a great question. The doing is kind of related to, I guess, a few things. One is like, what's the goal? So when, timeline, budget, like location, those kind of things that become more real when you kind of crystallize them. And then as you work back, the doing becomes like, I need to sell a car, I need to earn a little bit more, I need to pay down this debt, or I need to get rid of this credit card or whatever. And so you kind of, it layers back into a whole bunch of tactics that you need to execute, on the way to achieving the bigger goal.
The way you were saying that reminds me of like almost like a board game, like the game of life or something. So you've got the outcome there being the house, and there's these kind of things along the way. So if we break it down further into those little key milestones, what do you think are those steps that people need to look at? Is it like deposit first or paying? I guess it's individualized, but like, paying the debt and then this and then that.
So the first one is definitely deciding they actually want to buy a home. So if you haven't made that decision, all of the other things are kind of like almost, they're just like superfluous. Like if they're not really impacting anything until you've made the decision, you really want to buy a home. So it's like any major decision. When you decide, then everything kind of aligns, right? And you bring in everything into your world to make it happen. So the very first thing is people getting their head around the idea that, is this something you really want, or is this something you don't really want, right? So once you decide you really want and you're committed, then all the things start to surround yourself.
And sorry to interrupt, but what about people who think they really want a home, but they're so thick in this mindset of, but it's not possible?
Yeah, okay. So the first thing is you want it, then you got to go figure out how it happens, right? And there's kind of 2 camps. One is you actually are set up in a way that you could buy it with yourself or with your partner or whatever, and you've got enough money, you've got enough income, and you can actually make it happen. And that's a lot of people, most people. But there's other set of people who actually, they can't buy it on their own. And so you kind of got 2 strategies where it branches out. Are you going to be able to buy this house on your own, maybe with a boarder or something like that, and your family? Great. Then you can make all those things happen as you create a plan. Or is it very quickly clear that you will not be able to buy a house on your own? You must partner with somebody else. And that's like the most important branching point for most people. And if it's the second category, then you need to figure out, well, who is that person? And that second category is determined by both someone's income. So if you only earn maybe the entry wage like 60,000 or something, then you need someone else's income to be able to buy the house. Or if your KiwiSaver is only 20 or 30, you need someone else's. So that's the key point where you actually need to understand what the key strategy is. Like, you can't buy a house on your own in the next 5, 6, 7 years. If you want to buy one, you need to partner with someone.
When it comes to mapping out those milestones, say that you've got that established and you know, okay, I've got 30 or 40,000 and you still need 10 or 20,000 more to add for your deposit. How would you recommend people break that down in terms of like, what is a good timeline? How do you figure out how long it might take you to save X amount realistically?
So I guess there's two key things. One is, what is the savings target, right? So if it's 50, 60, 70,000 and you've only got 20, 30, 40, then you know what the gap is, right? And of course, at Aera, we also contribute 10, so you take that off, and then you've kind of got this gap you've got to get to. The next piece you've got to break down as well, how much am I saving at the moment every month? And there might be a number between negative and, 1, 2,000. You got to figure out, okay, well, that's how much I'm saving at the moment, but I want to create a pathway to getting to 20, 30,000. So you've got to kind of figure out, okay, how long is it going to take me to get 20,000? And can I change anything? So if I'm saving $500 a month right now, is there a way I could save 2,000, 1,000, 1,500? And then it's just basically simple math, right? So if you need 20,000 and you're saving $1,500 a month, okay, it's going to take you whatever it is, 15, 16 months. So basically breaking it down in terms of how far away am I and how much can I save? And that part is really critical in terms of like, well, what are you willing to sacrifice for that 1 to 2 years? Because for a lot of people, it's literally only 1 to 2 years that they might have to literally sacrifice a lot to save 1,500, 2,000. And if they don't make those decisions, then that timeline just kind of drips on and on and on.
When it does come to savings, I think a lot of people struggle with figuring out where they can save, but also how to like divvy up their paycheck, or even in a harder, I guess, sort of bucket if you're someone who works as a contractor and you don't have a set salary and you get income at different times. In both of those scenarios, what would you say are the easiest ways to figure out like percentage or what you should put away? Because I've heard a lot, and what I personally use a lot of the time is that 50-30-20 rule, which has been the easiest way for me, like mentally, to be like, okay, 50% to expenses, 30 to spend, 20 to saving. Is that a strategy you'd recommend in both situations, or like how do people kind of figure that out?
Yeah, we talk about this in the book, The Fastest Way to Your First Home, which is like, it's a pie chart. You obviously can decide what those are, 50-30-20, 50-40-10, 50-20-30. Like it's up to every individual how far they're willing to go, right? So first of all, you got to figure out what is it you absolutely need to live on. And that becomes the 50 or whatever it is for an individual person. And then the rest of the pie is like, okay, well, for how long am I willing to sacrifice X, Y, Z? And for some people, it might be like, actually, I'm not going to buy any wants for a year. And everything I've got above my needs is for saving. But once you come up with that ratio and you're committed to it, then you kind of know, like, okay, for this period of time, I'm making these sacrifices to achieve this kind of goal. But if you don't have a thought process around, well, what amount am I saving in what bucket, then generally most people will spend all of it, right? And as you said, like, if you've got the pie chart, you're saying, well, 30% I'm saving, and you direct it to a different account, people who set that up are exponentially more likely to achieve their savings goal, because
like
it kind
automated
of
account.
because it kind of moves out of their mind, moves out of their eyesight, and they then have to make a deliberate decision to dip into an account that they've decided was for something else to pull that money out to spend it. So that's one of the critical levers that people have when they make the decision they're going to save 30% of their income, and it just starts moving away into a different account. They start learning to live with the rest of the money. You know?
And there are some accounts, I know I've got a couple as well, where it will charge you a fee if you dip into it a certain amount or how many times. So I guess that's also another way to kind of keep yourself accountable and be like, okay,
it's not a huge fee,
no,
but psychologically,
it's just a little bit, you're like,
helpful.
Do I want to pay $5 for this transaction?
Or it could be a term deposit. It could be 3 months,
that's actually
6
even
months.
better,
And it's similar, like the bank will punish you if you pull it out, you know?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I've lost all that interest that I would have otherwise saved. And the actual amount of money is not that important. It's more like psychologically, you're like, oh, I was making this progress, and if I pull money out, then I'm actually going backwards.
I want to move on to debt, credit cards, and credit score specifically as well, because I've seen a lot of questions as well on our socials about credit score. first off, how do you check what your credit score is? What do the numbers mean? And why are so many people surprised that they might have a lower credit score or higher? Is that how it works? The higher, the better?
Higher the better, yeah.
Higher the better. So a lower one if they've never actually missed a credit card payment or things like that. Like, what actually impacts it?
So the credit score it's free to get, and we'll put some links in the show notes where you can just literally log online, give some information, like your driver's license or your passport, your name and your address, and then normally within hours, you'll get a score sent to you in an email. And it will show you a number. It will also show you the companies that have checked your credit score before, like your power company or whoever else, your Visa, card, your bank. And the idea is that 1,000 in New Zealand is like, you're an angel, it's perfect. I don't think anyone has 1,000. 500 is probably the benchmark of like, it's too low to buy a house.
Mm-hmm.
Anything below that means you've got a problem with your credit score.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're trying to buy a house, anything between like 550 to 750 is like the sweet spot. Anything above 750, you're golden. But if you're below like 600, 550, then there's something that's gone wrong. And what that means is you've missed a payment, you defaulted on a direct debit, you were late paying your credit card, you had some debt like afterpay or something that you weren't paying on time. And that's every time that happens, your credit score kind of goes down. So if you had one or two things like that happen, then your credit score would be much lower, even though you 80% of the time were fine. So it doesn't take that many things to kind of damage your credit score.
It's kind of like demerit points.
Definitely.
In a way. So do they go? So do they start to go up over time if you're better? Like, can you?
You have to then create positive behaviors for an extended period of time without the negative behaviors.
Yeah.
Right. So it's quite a long time. It's not like weeks. You can't reverse your credit score just by like overnight doing something. So one of the key things, if you're thinking about buying a house in the next 6, 12, 18 months, is you've got to look at your credit score, because if it's not positive, if it's like 530 or something, well, okay, you almost certainly are going to get questions from the bank. So whatever you've saved, how much you earn, it's actually not the most important thing right now. The most important thing is, how do I get that 530 to 600? And that would be around figuring out what's caused the credit score problem, and then having positive behaviors like paying bills, paying your credit card, whatever those things are that are more like these recurring financial commitments. Showing a pattern of positive behavior recovers the credit score.
So what happens if you have a credit card and you've not missed payments, but you just own a credit card or a couple? That impacts the credit score as well?
Not really, no, it doesn't. It impacts that banks have inquired on whether your credit score is good before they issue a credit card, which is okay, and it's not a problem. That's not usually an issue unless there's like heaps of inquiries. Like you've tried to apply for lots of different types of debt, then people do look at that a little bit more negatively. But if you've got a credit card and you're paying it off, that doesn't negatively impact your credit score. But it also isn't the fastest way to improve your credit score. It's more about like the variety of bills that you have. So it's the power bill, the Sky bill, some sort of car payment, and you're consistently meeting them. Those are the things that build the credit score.
Now, the next one I want to look at is a massive question that we get a lot: student loan. A lot of the time, even in those situation type chats that we have with people, we go, do you have any debt? They go, no. Oh, but student loan. I have student loan. And then we have to explain to people that actually that probably doesn't fall under debt as such when we look at your situation. So how does student loan, if it does at all, affect your home buying chances?
So student loan is looked somewhat differently than all the other types of debt, because it's obviously this government kind of supported thing. It's on lower interest rates and all that kind of stuff. And it's basically taken out as like, okay, you earn $100, but you've got $5 of student loan. Then they kind of like take it out and then figure out how much you can afford to manage your repayments. The quirky thing about student loan is the more you're earning, the more the government takes off you. So the key thing is like, is the student loan, like say if you're a couple, if someone's earning not very much, let's say 60, and they've got this huge student loan, it's way better than if someone's earning 120 and they've got the same amount of student loan, because the government takes way more from the person who's earning 120, even though the loan amount is the same. So the student loan is a very case-by-case situation where you kind of have to come, chat to an Aera coach, figure out as a couple, how does it impact your situation? But basically, the more you earn as a person, as an individual, even if you're part of a couple, the more negatively the student loan impacts you because the government takes more of it away. It doesn't really matter about how big the loan is. So the loan could be 10,000 or 100,000. If you're earning more, the government's going to take more of you every extra dollar you earn. On the other kind of debt, it's much, much more negative. So if you've got car loans, personal loans, these kind of things that are, charging you 12, 13, 14% interest, those kind of payments, it's largely about how much is your weekly payment. So you could have a $50,000 car loan, but the key thing is your repayment at the moment $100 or is it $500? Because the bank looks at it as like, okay, if it's $100, that's $100 less that they could afford on their mortgage. And for a typical person, the mortgage could only be $600, $700 for the house, a week, a fortnight for the house. So $100 becomes like, oh, now we're going to lend you 15% less, which is generally like $100,000 less or something. So the amount of the weekly repayment on your car loan or personal loan is the critical piece that the bank will just literally clamp down and say, well, we're not going to lend you $150,000 because you're paying $300 a week in car loans.
Yeah. So that's how you can kind of, I guess, again, I can't help but keep thinking of this as like a board game thing where you're kind of like going along the, splitting different roads and deciding where you're going and things. But I think that would be really helpful for people to know now, like, this is the end goal. Work backwards is always the easiest way to do it. And these are the potential things and roadblocks you may need to address along the way.
Yeah.
Once you can kind of map those out, figure out where you're at, gives you a much clearer route as to this is kind of the home stretch now from here.
And then they're not so much roadblocks as kind of like landmines. It's like, you can always get through something, but if you don't know that this thing is hiding in the background, it's like killing your chances.
Yeah.
And you can't reverse engineer it somehow, you don't know what to do about it, right? So we have a customer this week, a client of Aera, who has a car lease. And the key to her situation was you have to break the lease. And it costs money to break the lease. But the car lease is hundreds of dollars a week, which is totally limiting her ability to buy a house because she needs that extra $100,000 or $200,000 in mortgage. So the only way to solve that, even if she earns more next year and has a bigger deposit, if she's still got that lease, it's still, the bank's gonna be like, we're not gonna lend you that extra 100 something. So the only way for her to solve that is to kill the lease. And up front, it might cost her $1,000 or $2,000 to kill the lease, but instantly it enables her to buy the house. So you kind of have to have these like understandings of like, well, if I turn this key, this then opens a door. And that's a great example of someone going, I'm willing to spend that extra $1,000 to crush the lease and cut it off because instantly we know now I can afford the house.
Yeah. Well, we really hope that this podcast helped you in some way to figure out kind of where you're at or how to kind of work through, what did you call them, landmines? Or
I call them landmines.
things
You
in the
call them
background.
roadblocks.
Obviously, everyone's situation is very personal, and we'd always encourage you to, reach out to Aera and talk to people about it because there are often things that, someone else might be able to identify on your path that you haven't seen that's sort of in the background or how to work around those things. So if you love this episode, send it to a friend or family member who may be at that point trying to figure out their strategy. Click subscribe. You can also check us out on socials at @fasttrack_pod, and we'll catch you next time.